Why don't you wait until you watch the series before you trash it? That's what was being parroted repeatedly in my comment section before the dumpster fire to end all dumpster fires hit our screens. If you watch my pre-Series 11 videos, I made clear that these videos were mere supposition. I was looking at news items as they were reported and was speculating on how they would play out. Well, I've now watched Series 11 in full, and I can say I was wrong. I was wrong about the degree to which identity politics would play into the series, about the degree to which Jodie Whittaker was miscast, about the degree to which Chris Chibnall's scripts would be awful, about how negatively the inexperience and ideological leanings of our guest writers would negatively impact the show. Yep, I was wrong. This series was worse than anything we could have imagined. I mean, my God. There wasn't just a few things wrong with this series, almost everything was wrong with this series. Let's start with the 13th Doctor. All the other New Who Doctors won me over by the end of their first episode. By the end of Rose, The Christmas Invasion, The 11th Hour, and Deep Breath, you could say definitively this is the Doctor. Now here we are at the end of Series 11, and nothing about Whittaker's performance leads anyone to say honestly that this is the Doctor. I don't know what the hell this is, but this is not the Doctor. Jodie Whittaker's performance is all over the place, and she played the Doctor differently in each episode, which is indicative of the fact that she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. Moreover, each Doctor has had their own unique personality separate from all other incarnations. Whittaker has done nothing more than provide us with very poor impressions of Doctors 10 and 11. She seems incapable of delivering or even understanding the nuances that make the Doctor the Doctor. Her facial expressions are over-exaggerated and often don't fit with the tone of a particular scene or episode. They are just awkward. Then there's the costume. The Doctor's costume was always intended to illustrate the character's eccentricities. For Doctor 13, however, her costume was little more than a quote bold statement that this is now a full-fledged third-wave feminist SJW NPC propaganda piece. If this iteration of the Doctor wasn't bad enough, then we have the actress. Whittaker seems to be going out of her way to alienate Doctor Who's most loyal fans. Just look at any interview she's given, especially when she writes off the classic series as, quote, celebrating the white male gaze. I would also suggest that you check out a little video she made for Stylus just before the series went out. Then we have Chris Chibnall. When both Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat became showrunners, they had already proven themselves, and Moffat was known for delivering the best scripts during the RTD era. They had some cred. Chibnall, on the other hand, has given us one decent series of Broadchurch and two horrible series. Let's also not forget his Cyberwoman Torchwood episode. More troubling, however, is the fact that Chibnall had already disproven himself when it came to writing Doctor Who years before being given the showrunner position. When you think early Moffat, you think of masterpieces like Listen or The Empty Child. What kind of episodes did Chris Chibnall pen before becoming showrunner? 42, The Hungry Earth, Cold Blood, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, and The Power of Three. This is a list of some of the most underwhelming and terrible episodes of the pre-Chibnall era. How could anyone think this guy would be a good choice for showrunner? Moreover, when becoming showrunner, rather than pick the best man or woman for the job, he insisted that Doctor 13 had to be a woman. When his first choice, Olivia Colman, a choice that I would have supported, reportedly turned down the role, where did he go for his runner-up? Yet another person he had already worked with, and someone who was completely unsuited for the role. Then he outdid the terrible scripts he had already written and gave us stories that somehow managed to be even worse. It's not just that his episodes were terrible, they were infested with NPC talking points, which we'll look at in more depth in a minute. The only two bright spots this series were Bradley Walsh and Tosin Cole. They were given horrendous material to work with, and yet they still come off as likable. Bradley Walsh deserves special credit. I think under a competent showrunner, he could have been one of the Doctor's most loved companions. Then Chibnall gave us New Who Adric. Why is Yaz even there? This character has done nothing all series. She's nothing more than a background decoration. You see, Chibs, and the BBC, if you cast actors based on the diversity and inclusion strategy, then that doesn't mean that you aren't required to actually do something with them. Now let's get into these 10 masterpieces. The Woman Who Fell to Earth was a very unremarkable regeneration story. While other regeneration stories had me excited for Doctor Who's future, this one had me saying, what the hell is this? I was originally somewhat forgiving of Whittaker's performance in this episode because the Doctor had just regenerated and is always a little bit wacky at first. The problem is that by the end of the episode, when her personality is supposed to be established, it still wasn't believable. It was like a poor fan production with a female actor trying to pull off David Tennant. The episode also introduced character traits that never went anywhere. For example, we learn that Ryan has dyspraxia, and then it's barely ever mentioned again. We learn that Yaz is a cop. The only place this goes throughout the series is that we learn she's a useless cop, definitely a result of regressive equity quota hiring. This is what happens when you make hiring decisions based on demographic representation and not qualifications and competence. You end up with Yaz. Is this who you want responding if someone is breaking into your house in the middle of the night? This is also the episode that we learn that when it comes to creating new monsters, Chibs sucks. Here we get introduced to the Tooth Monster. He probably thinks this is the new master. This is not the new master, Chibs. Then we go to Chibnall's second disaster piece for this series, The Ghost Monument. Honestly, this is one of the most below average and forgettable Doctor Who stories ever to grace our screens. A race where the TARDIS is revealed to be the Ghost Monument at the end. About the only thing of note that happened in this episode is that the Doctor gets to put a white dude in his place. You'll notice she does that a lot this series. And that's all that happened. Anybody who thought this series was bound to be brilliant should have been second guessing themselves after seeing this episode. Remember, this was the 13th Doctor's first post-regeneration story, and this is what Chibnall gave us. Next, things start to get real with Rosa, the episode that seemed to make me a household hated name. Listen, dumbasses, for the last time I was not attacking the historical event itself. I fully acknowledge its importance as a symbol in the fight for civil rights. The problem I had, morons, is that it went out of its way to depict every white person as the Antichrist. What Chibs and Mallory Blackman, yes, I got her name right this time, actually did was turn a battle against one form of racism into another form of racism. The BBC seems to have special hatred of white people, particularly white males. Here's the thing, idiots. What you see as privilege or white male privilege is really just economic privilege, which extends to maybe the top 1 to 5% of this demographic. Many of which, I would dare to say, are virtue-signaling elitists that work at the BBC and that were lucky enough not to get equity quoted out of their jobs. As for other people in that demographic, they don't have privilege. They have the opposite of that, since society is now actively and legally discriminating against them. And if they are in the bottom 50%, then they are pretty much screwed. Now do you people understand why seeing crap like this pisses them off? Where were the white people that vehemently opposed racism in the southern US in the 1950s? We'll just pretend they don't exist. We need to keep our narrative straight. Oh, and who was our main villain in this episode? A space racist. No backstory, no nothing. He's just a space racist. If you weren't convinced by the first 2 episodes that Chibnall was a crap writer who cares about nothing more than pushing agendas, then surely this one should have clued you in. This is also where we get a clear indication that Chibs really doesn't like Americans, and you get the distinct impression that he views them as rather lowly beings. Of course, Chibs, how dare they not acknowledge your greatness? Bow down to Lord Chibs. To drive home his anti-American message, in case we didn't get it the first time, he shoves arachnids in the UK in the face of the world's greatest superpower. And watching the episode, you'd think that it was a parody, but no, it's just more of Chibnall's terrible writing. The spiders were nothing but a side plot, so Chibs could take pot shots at stand-in Trump and attack American culture. Good work, Chibs. That's bound to ensure Doctor Who's continued popularity in the US. Face it, guys and gals, Chibnall cannot write to save his life. I'm actually starting to wonder if there was a ghostwriter working on the first season of Broadchurch, because it was quite good. There's no way that that was written by the same person that wrote most of Series 11. By the end of this episode, people surely should have seen that Chibs was a crap writer and the series was going nowhere. We thought that it couldn't get any worse than this. Surely the series had reached its nadir. Oh boy, were we wrong. Enter the Suranga conundrum. This is where 1987's season 24 officially stopped being Doctor Who's low point. Good lord, I really don't know if Chibs planned this as a comedy or as a serious episode, because this episode was so poorly executed on every level. Our villain is a terrible CGI monster, and don't forget that this is the episode with the pregnant man. It's pretty obvious Chibs put this in there on purpose. He wanted attention and to further demonstrate his wokeness to the world. This is also where Whittaker delivers her worst performance, which is saying a lot because she delivers variations on worst performance ever throughout the series. This episode also featured some of the worst guest performances ever given by guest stars on Doctor Who. So that was the first half of Series 11, and anybody with any common sense should have been saying to themselves, what in the name of hell? Putting aside gender and putting aside ideology for a minute, these were 5 of the worst episodes in the 55-year history of Doctor Who. Even the first episode, which could have been excused as a pilot for a new run and as having a doctor possibly suffering from post-regenerative psychosis, could no longer be excused. It wasn't setting anything up. It was just the least crap episode out of 5 of the worst pieces of shit ever hurled at Doctor Who fandom. Up to that point anyway. Some hope that things would improve from here. How wrong you were. Enter the remainder of Series 11's guest writers. There is a long roster of Who writers that have more than proven themselves, yet Chibs decided, no, I'm not using any of these people. These are the people I want to use. And some of you are still defending Chibs as a competent showrunner. Enter Vinay Patel, a political playwright with almost no television experience and no genre experience. He's the one that gave us Demons of the Punjab. Here we'll also take note of a certain religious bias within the current BBC, and I'm going to touch on this more in a bit. But remember, this episode does its best to portray Islam in the best light possible. This episode seeks to shit on Britain for being solely responsible for the disaster that came after India's partitioning in 1947. Here's the fact that Patel did not mention. This was 1947, and what major event concluded only a few years prior to this? For people that don't know history, which is a lot of people these days, the Second World War wasn't exactly kind to Britain. I don't know, maybe the dropping of bombs may have had something to do with this. Britain was broke, and maintaining its presence in India was no longer feasible. Yes, the handling of the partition was a disaster. disaster. But who is slaughtering who, and for what reason? I encourage you all to watch a documentary or pick up a book on the subject, as it's much too complex to examine in detail in this video. It was also much too complex a subject to have been included as the backdrop for a 45-minute TV show. Next, we have the closest thing to regular Doctor Who that we got in this series. Granted, it was a very mediocre episode, but it was the best thing in this 10-pack of shit. Kerblam was written by Pete McTeague, the only one of our guest writers with a substantial amount of television writing under his belt, but again, not much genre experience. People seem to be confused about what the political message was this week. At the outset, it appeared to be a riff on capitalism and Amazon, but they pretty much come out as the good guys at the end of this. The message was more subtle, probably because McTeague may be the most talented writer this season. What was the message, you ask? Remember our terrorist? Here's your message this week. Straight white males are to be allies only. You are never to take things into your own hands, because you are beneath us. You are incompetent and stupid. There you have it. The message was somewhat hidden, but it was still there. Next we have Oh Lord, The Witchfinders, written by feminist Joy Wilkinson. Setting aside feminism for a minute, this was a stupid and lazy plot. A plot that has been done dozens of times before by much more competent writers. The only difference here is that aliens were thrown in at the end. What a twist. The feminist propaganda thrown into this episode is done so poorly, with no subtlety at all, that it's freaking hilarious. There is one bright spot to this, which might have been unintentional. Alan Cumming as King James is hysterical. I think he might have done this on purpose after realizing how completely and utterly ridiculous this script was. Also, remember I noted a certain religious bias. Remember how Islam is largely praised in Demons of the Punjab? Well, Christianity is vilified in this episode. People, can you honestly tell me that there isn't a clear agenda within the BBC? Then we have one of the most reprehensible episodes Doctor Who has ever done. Actually, I take that back. Here we have the most reprehensible thing Doctor Who has ever done. It Takes You Away, written by Ed Heim, with almost no experience at all. Let's hope it stays that way after this episode. This episode is inexcusable. A contrived, badly conceived, and poorly executed episode that had only one message. Single fathers are garbage. I can only imagine how this episode must have felt to some of Doctor Who's male fans that have been put through the ringer in custody battles. Now they have their favorite show taking a dump on them as well. There are very few instances where I can genuinely say Doctor Who made me angry. Usually it's just irritated and disappointed, but this episode made me angry. Moreover, Whittaker's attack on our single father was completely out of character, and I think everyone forgot what this show was supposed to be about while making this episode. I suggest that if you haven't seen it yet, check out my review and discussion videos, where I go into my complete and utter disdain for this episode in more detail. And with that, we've come to our series finale. Remember when they used to be epic? They were always huge under RTD with some massive universe-changing event. They may not have been the most subtle of things, but damn, they were exciting. Stephen Moffat took a different approach. He took RTD's series arc concept and may have overcomplicated things. It's pretty much a joke now that nobody can fully understand everything that's going on in a Moffat finale, or in some cases, anything that was going on in a Moffat finale, but at least they felt epic. You have no idea what's happening, but at least it sounds and looks cool. Then we have Chibnall's first stab at a series finale, and what does he do? He makes it a complete non-event and presents us with his sixth very mediocre script. The Battle of Ranskor Av Kolos is one of the most underwhelming episodes of Doctor Who ever written, even if it was presented mid-series. If you didn't realize what a hack Chibnall is by the end of this episode, then what the hell is wrong with you? The basic elements were plagiarized from The Pirate Planet and The Stolen Earth, two brilliant stories, one of which was written by Douglas Adams. And somehow it falls completely flat. This episode was just boring, and this was not helped by Akinola's sleep-inducing score. The only saving grace this episode was the performances given by Bradley Walsh and Mark Addy, and this had nothing to do with the scripts. They are just good actors. I guess the other positive is that Chibs forgot to include his usual progressive message this week. Remember when Chibs said he didn't want any classic monsters this series? One would think that this meant that he had some brilliant ideas for villains. Nope, he just brought back the Tooth Monster from the first episode. To say that he ended his first series on a note of mediocrity would be an understatement. The ending to this dumpster fire was so anticlimactic that it's absolutely hilarious. Now let's rank these episodes from least terrible to most terrible. Starting with the least terrible. At number 10 we have Kerblam. At number 9 we have The Woman Who Fell to Earth. At number 8 we have The Battle of Ranskor Av Kolos. At number 7 we have Demons of the Punjab. At number 6 we have Rosa. At number 5 we have The Ghost Monument. At number 4 we have The Suranga Conundrum. At number 3 we have Arachnids in the UK. At number 2 we have The Witchfinders, and our winner for worst episode of the series and probably the worst episode in Doctor Who history we have It Takes You Away. Congratulations, you worthless, defaming piece of shit. And that's it for my overview of Series 11. It was bad. It was really bad. And in my view, the ratings were higher than the previous two series based primarily on the polarization. Many people could not believe what they were watching. This was not Doctor Who. This was a very bad Doctor Who spinoff that might actually be worse than Class. I don't really see how the show will recover from this. And that's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Twitter. And as always, everyone, thank you for watching and have a great day.